Hey friends, Kevin here, and today we're going to talk about places you can sleep for free in your van while you are out adventuring, whether it's a minivan, camper van, cargo conversion van, a Class B van like my big white van, which is basically an RV. It's going to be a little bit different depending on which one of these is going to work for you, just your lifestyle. But a few things to keep in mind. Part of this is going to depend on how stealth that you can make your van, how well you can make it blend in. Obviously, just the nicer looking vehicle you have is going to make things a little bit easier. We can sit here and debate whether there's people being a little too judgmental sometimes or whatever, but the fact is, if the crappier looking vehicle you have, the more you're going to stick out. So the nicer you can keep it, the nicer looking you can keep it, the easier it's going to make it to stay and be able to sleep overnight without being bothered in a lot of these places. But let's get to it. Let's get to these places because a couple will be obvious to you, but I'm betting that some of them are places that you never thought about being able to spend the night. You're not going to be able to find this in every town, and you're going to think I'm joking when I first say this, but if you can find a 24-hour donut shop, coffee shop, I broke down across from one of these one time. It is the best and safest place you can be, is being near one of these all-night donut shops. It's kind of the old joke about cops and donut shops, but it's true, man. The police are through there all times of the day and the night. So it makes it one of the safest places you could actually be. And when you're camping, you're trying to stay in your van overnight and be stealth, and you're just trying to sleep. That's what you want. You want to be safe. You don't want to have to worry about people. You don't want to be in some bad area where you've got bad people walking around. So I told you some of these would be maybe off the wall things you hadn't thought about before. Then, of course, there's Walmart, except in big cities. If it's a large city, you can pretty much count Walmart out. Most medium and small sized towns, you usually can still camp overnight in a Walmart. Again, if you're in something that looks like my big van, which is obvious that it's an RV, you know, you just kind of go over with wherever the trucks and the RVs are. Unless I see a sign there that specifically says no overnight parking, I simply assume I can. The minivan, you can be, you know, in a nice minivan, you can be a little more stealth and kind of fit in and just move down, and it's obvious where the regular store traffic ends and down where there's a few cars, you know, that are in each aisle that are the store employees. And keep yourself out of the main aisles, those main drags down to the main doors, because you're going to have more traffic running back and forth all night. Now, most Walmarts are not 24 hours at this point, even the super centers, but even Walmarts that are closing at 9 and 10 p.m., they have 8 or 10 people that are in that store working as stalkers and doing overnight stuff and cleaning. So there are cars normally, and trucks and vans, sitting in that parking lot that belong to employees. So you can easily get out of the way, not be in anybody's way. But if it's something that says specifically no overnight parking, then I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go find another place because I don't want to be bothered. I don't want the knock on the door at 1 o'clock in the morning and have to move. And keep in mind that a lot of times this has nothing to do with Walmart. I've done some other videos on Walmarts before, but this has nothing to do with Walmart. Sometimes it's a town ordinance, city ordinance, and sometimes it's Walmart is in a strip mall kind of situation, and somebody else owns that property, and that property owner has decided to overnight parking. That brings us up to city-run campsites. Now, these things aren't generally well advertised, and you have things like freecampsites.net, but they're not all free. Sometimes they are free. You can run into that in the West, in Oklahoma and Texas and different places. Sometimes they are free for a day. I've seen them be free up to 3 days, and then there's usually some little fee you have to pay if you want to stay longer, you know, $10 or $15 a night. And Often this is with full electric hookups and a water spigot and everything you could want, because they're trying to get you to stay there, because they know if you're there, you're going to go out and spend money in their restaurants, their antique shops, and their gas stations and supermarkets. And it becomes a good deal for everyone as long as it's not abused. And again, in a minivan, you can still get by with this just fine. You need to be self-contained. You need to have bathroom facilities in your van, because this may be a small town where you don't have restaurants that you can run into to use the bathroom. And even though you may be in a city park, those facilities may not be working or may actually be closed at certain times a year. A lot of times they will still allow camping and things there during the colder months, but they have already shut off the water, so they don't have water pipes freezing and busting. Often these are run or controlled by the police department itself in that little town. A lot of times that's who you go pay. I have no problem with that. I think it's a great deal. I've done that, I don't know, at least a dozen times in different areas. It's a little bit hard to find because they don't advertise it. You may end up running through the city park and just seeing a sign. It's not like you're going to see a sign at the town entrance that says welcome RVs, or even one that pointing off the main street to whatever park it is. The last place I was in, it just had a phone number. You kind of called and told them, and you know, somebody'd be around in a day or two to collect the money, or you run by a town hall, a police station, and pay for it. Then you have gyms. If you're doing a gym, a Planet Fitness or something like that, it's better if you're a member in case somebody does come around and peck on the window. But again, this is going to depend on the location. But you want one that's running 24 hours. Another one of the obvious ones is going to be truck stops. Flying J, among the big ones, seems to be the most friendly to RVers, most friendly to people camping or staying there in vehicles, meaning self-contained minivans or camper vans. Some of the other chains aren't as friendly. Some of them are becoming really anti-RV, but a lot of the independents in regional stuff you will find that's not part of a major chain, they usually have no problem with it. The main thing, and I'm sure all of you guys and gals know this, but just in case there's somebody out there that hasn't done this kind of stuff before, the truck drivers are trying to make a living. They come first. So you don't want to get in their way. You don't want to go and park yourself somewhere where the semis, the poor truck driver is going to have trouble turning and getting around you in order to get in and out of his parking space or in and out of that lot. So always kind of look around, try to get out of their way a little bit. And that includes not just being beside them, but making sure you're out of the path that they are going to need to travel to get in and out. Because often they're going to leave much earlier in the morning than you are, and they don't need to wake up and be trying to start their workday and have you sitting in their way to where they have to squeeze around you. One of my favorites is casinos. They will usually tell you to call ahead. The stuff on Indian reservations, I don't have a good luck with. I'm talking about the major casino chains that you find in the South, which are the same as the ones in Atlantic City, which are the same as the ones in Las Vegas. Those are the places I prefer to stay. They're usually patrolled pretty well. I don't mind going in and dropping a few dollars just for the heck of it. They have places in there to eat. You know, you're camping there for free, give them some money. That's what the trade-off is. It's more convenient for you because you're trying to get to wherever you're trying to go out in nature. You're generally going to be close to a major road or a major interstate, so you're not having to go 25 miles off to find someplace to camp for the night. And you're getting to do it for free most of the time. It works out to be a good deal, but keep it a good deal by spending a little money. Even if you're not into gambling, you know, go through the casino, get a souvenir, hang out for a few minutes, go have a snack, you know, go pay for an overpriced cookie or Coke or something, you know. Let them make a couple bucks back because they're doing all of us a favor. Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's, which are all under the same company umbrella now, have always been really RV friendly. But again, this is RVs. My big van counts as an RV, and yes, I have stayed there. As a matter of fact, I stayed a month or so back at the big one in Memphis, where the big pyramid is, and I'm going to do a whole video on that for those of you that have never been there before. You're right by the bridge going across the Mississippi River. Matter of fact, 2 days after I went over that bridge, it was shut down because it's defective and has a big crack in it. It's just a good deal. It's not going to be the quietest place necessarily to spend the night, because generally you're going to be having to deal with road noise. But if the road noise doesn't bother you, you know, you have a few fans or something to move air around in your van that give you a little white noise, then, you know, I'm able to block it out and have no problem, and I'm able to read, or I'm able to, you know, watch a little television or whatever before I go to bed, and it's just not an issue. Something a lot of people don't think about are visitor centers, or kind of smaller town, smaller city museums. You will hit these places, and I have done this before. There is a museum I really want to go to, or something in a visitor center I really want to see, and they have an odd day of the week that they're closed. You know, a lot of tourist stuff is closed on Mondays because they're having to work through the weekends. But sometimes you hit weird places that the stuff is closed on a Tuesday or a Thursday, or whatever it is when they take a day off through the week. And if I really want to go do that the next day, I have no problem staying in their lot or staying on the street next to it or whatever. And I've never been bothered doing that. And then an officer comes around, I would have no problem telling him, yeah, I'm staying here because I'm doing that and giving them my money tomorrow. I pulled up here and was going to do it today. They're closed, so I'm going to do it tomorrow. End of story. You know, unless they have, again, some ordinance that they don't allow anyone sleeping in a vehicle in their town, it shouldn't be an issue. Cracker Barrel restaurants are a good deal because they welcome RVers to spend the night. Again, they're doing it for some extra business. So if you get to spend the night at Cracker Barrel for free, go in the next morning and grab a little bit of something for breakfast. Let them make a few dollars back. Specifically say something to the cashier or the waitress or the manager that's in there, and let them know that you appreciate them doing that, and you're returning the favor. And I'll let them know that I'm returning the favor for them letting me do that by coming in there and spending some money the next day. I want that to be a thing that continues on and on and on as an option for me when I'm out different places. Now, again, you need to be in an RV. So you need to be, that pretty much is going to be something like my big white van, which is professionally converted. You really shouldn't be over there trying to do that in that lot if you're in a minivan or something that you're trying to be too stealth. There's going to be better options on this list for you to go to. Cracker Barrels will close at 9 or maybe 10 o'clock on the weekends. Their entire staff is usually out of there within an hour, and that lot is empty, and it's as quiet as a lot is going to be. That brings us up to the next one, which is 24-hour restaurants. I know a lot of people think this is a great place to stay, whether it's an IHOP that's open 24 hours. I really don't want to be parked in the lot of a fast food restaurant all night. It tends to not draw the best crowd. It certainly doesn't draw, even if it's not a bad area of town, which it often is, it tends to draw a younger, noisier crowd. So I'm not interested in doing that for free if I'm going to be woken up 3 or 4 times during the night. While that is an option and something I would do in an absolute pinch, it's pretty much at the bottom of my list. So small town airports. Now, I'm not talking about airports in big cities because they're going to charge you $20 a night to park a car. I'm talking about the little airfields that aren't even open all the time. But around those, usually a lot of times there's nothing going on. So you can get by in a pinch, and as long as you have a halfway decent vehicle, nobody's probably going to say anything to you. Nobody's going to think twice about it. They're just going to think that you're one of the people that had a plane there, and you little plane, and you flew it somewhere. Another place to park your van overnight to sleep in, carpool lots, rideshare lots. I think the state of Virginia, I'll post this down below if I can find it again, they've even got a site that lists all of these throughout the state. And again, if I'm something like that that's full up, I'm not going to sneak in there and take somebody's space that somebody that's working needs to park their car and be able to do this, to have an alternate way to work. But most of these that I have ever run across, they are nowhere near being full. Sometimes there's room for 40 cars or 20 cars, and usually there's only one or two there. So if I grab a space, I'm not taking anything away from anyone, which I would not want to do. Courthouses and police stations. Now, if you don't like the police, you can pretty much skip this one, but I have no problem with it. I have been at towns with festivals, and once everybody departed late at night in a downtown area, maybe this is something that goes on for a couple of days, and I want to be there the next day when something opens, I have no problem with going ahead. And sometimes you have some residential stuff around it, but I've never been bothered. I will go ahead and I will pull in the side of the courthouse. I've never had any problem doing it. Police stations, if I was in a bind, I would have no problem pulling into a police station. I would have no problem calling or even walking in there and asking for permission if it was just some weird situation. And in smaller towns, counties, I'm sure they're going to say, hey, go ahead, man, it's fine. It's not something I would want to make a habit of, but I would have no problem with doing it. Obvious one before we get back into the more obscure stuff are rest areas. This varies by state. I did a whole video on this, and some states are fine with you spending the night. Some states have limits. They don't want you there more than 4 hours. They don't want you there completely overnight. And you're just going to have to play by whatever rules that state has. Or if you choose to chance it, understand that you may get a knock on the door when you don't want it, depending on how often the local police, state police, probably because they're on interstates, is patrolling that particular area. So again, if I'm in a state that just isn't real friendly with overnight parking for a rest area, for a rest stop, I'm simply not going to do it. I'm going to go find somewhere else, because more towards larger cities again, which I generally try to avoid, but I have done this before, what they call business areas, industrial areas, where you have a lot of factories, where you have a lot of trucks going in and out. They tend to be on the back streets. And again, you're just going to have to use your own judgment for this, because some of these are okay, and some of them are they're just a little iffy. Some of these areas can be a little sketchy. And if you pull in and they look sketchy and you see people wandering around that worry you, leave. But if you do this, get out of the main way. Don't be parked directly in front of somebody's business. Move on down the street a little bit. A lot of these businesses, they have their little lanes that go into their lane or their warehouse. And then often they'll have a fence area, and sometimes that fenced area may be covered with something so you can't see it. That's where you want to be. And again, the setup of your van is going to determine how easy this is going to be. If you have 4 bicycles and 8 other things hanging off of your van, it's going to be harder. Whereas like my minivan, I try to keep as stealth as possible and no one pays attention to it. Another option is church parking lots. Now, I see people mention this stuff all the time, and they're talking about calling ahead, and I'm just laughing at this because, again, I'm in rural areas. Unless you're in some pretty good-sized places, they aren't going to have people there all day long. They tend to only have people there on days that they have church, which often is like a Wednesday and a Sunday. They're not running full-time secretaries and staff that are there 40 hours a week. I think a lot of this stuff that people put out there sometimes is they're just dreaming or they're repeating what somebody else said, and it's just not that way in the real world. But in a more country area, more rural area, I have no problem staying in, off to the side in a church parking lot. Generally, nobody's going to bother me. Where you have an exception to that is going to be if you're out a little bit and you have a church that you see and you have a house sitting near it. because often that house is going to be the parsonage for that church. And if that's the only thing in that little area, and when they look out and they see some stranger parked over there, especially in a van, and more especially if you look a little sketchy, they are probably going to come over and check on you. That doesn't mean they won't let you stay, but they're probably going to check on you. Hotels. Not my favorite, not something I specifically go and look to do, but it is something that I know a lot of people that have success with. Now, again, this is going to not work well in your big cities, which have, paid parking, which have parking garages, all of that kind of thing. But when you get out into your smaller cities and your small towns, hotels are around as long as they're not full up. You're not putting anybody out if you grab a space over at the side or the end of the parking lot. And in general, people aren't going to pay attention to it. What you do want to be mindful of is, on your quick little drive through the parking lot, make sure that there aren't some kind of hang tags or things on the dashboard to where they have made people register their vehicles. But again, in smaller places, that very seldom happens. This is something that, if I was doing this, it would be because I was out traveling late and I jumped off the road and I just didn't have a lot of good options. And yes, I may jump in there and do it for a night. It's not something I'm personally going to make a habit of, but it can work. Hospitals. Hospitals can work. Now, understand though, with hospitals, it depends on how much traffic is going to bother you. It depends on how big that hospital parking lot is and can you get over to the side. And I've seen where some of these people recommend, oh yeah, you want to be right there at the ER. Well, first of all, I don't want to be at the ER. I don't want the traffic and the ambulances and people running in and out of there all night past me. I'm not trying to freeload. I'm trying to find some peace and quiet. So I am certainly not going to take up a spot that may be needed by someone coming in there or someone's family coming in there. Do these places get patrolled? Some do, some don't. It just depends on how big the hospital is. But I don't plan on staying there for 3 days or a week. I'm not trying to live there. I'm just trying to find a place to spend the night, and it may be more convenient for me because I'm tired than driving somewhere else. Or the next day, there's something in the area I'm in that I want to get up and do or see. So I'm just kind of along those same lines are adult care places or nursing homes. Or adult care places, at least, that are 24 hours. Because they tend to have certain times, and after that, late in the evening, at night, up through the next morning, the only people that are going to be parked around in that lot basically are some employees, the employees that work there all night. So you're not going to be putting anybody out. You're not going to be in anybody's way. A lot of times they're in areas that are pretty remote, pretty quiet. You're just not going to have a lot of traffic and stuff coming by. So it is, again, in a pinch, when you're out, you're stuck, you're traveling late, whatever it is, it's something to have in your arsenal of places to think about that certainly are a potential for you to be able to sleep in your van. We mentioned courthouses and police stations I have had no problems with. Another option in some areas is going to be fire stations. A lot of times they have a lot of space. They have a lot of areas around them. Obviously, you don't want to be anywhere in front of those big doors if something happens. And understand that there's the chance of, if you're parked at one of those, that at 3 o'clock in the morning, obviously, it can get really noisy really fast. So if you're okay with that, that's fine. Again, this is not something I want to do in a city or a larger town where probably every night, at least once, they're going to have to go out on a call. But in smaller areas, smaller towns, more rural things, it's absolutely fine because, the odds are in your favor that they won't actually have to go out on a call tonight. And I have no problem, going and talking to whoever's there, unless it's too late. If it's, if it's 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and I try not to be out looking for a place that late, but things do happen depending on where I am and what I'm doing that day, that it would, in which case I'm not going to bother with asking for permission or any of that stuff. I'm just going to get out of the way, and I'm going to do it. But again, understand there is a little bit of a chance of someone coming up and knocking on your door to see what you're doing. But in general, if you're out of the way, nobody's going to pay attention to you if you're doing it once. If they see you there 2 or 3 days in a row, yeah, you're going to have problems. For a one night stand in van life, looking for a place to sleep, it's fine. And then we come to one of the best, and especially, I think this is a great ideal if you have a little caravan, if you are with someone else in another vehicle, and there's 2 or 3 of you or whatever. In smaller towns, especially out west, it's no problem, is staying at abandoned businesses. When it's obvious that that business has been closed down for 20 years or more, why not just pull over and stay there? And a lot of times you're in a small town, you're not going to have a lot of traffic, people aren't going to be out late. They're really not going to pay that much attention to you. Bonus, and especially in a little downtown area, downtown street areas, if you're anywhere near an auto parts store, people are just going to assume that you're there because you need something out of the auto parts store the next day. So most people aren't going to even think twice about it. They're going to notice you're from out of the area, and their first thought's going to be, oh, he needs a part, he needs a radiator hose, he needs something. That's why he's there for the night. You're not bothering anybody. So it can work out really well. And all of these things I'm talking about, let me know. I know a lot of people talk about stealth camping, and, you know, they're trying to go into some place at midnight, and they're trying to leave at 5 in the morning before anybody gets there. Let me let you on a little secret here. I am not a morning person. I don't want to be up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning and having to get out and drive and go find somewhere else to be. So I avoid anything that's possibly going to put me in that situation. I'm not trying to beat anybody out of anything. I'm not trying to be that hidden in that stealth from things. So places I recommend and the way to do it, it's places that I want to be able to be there until 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes later if I choose to, until I decide to go start my day and do whatever research I'm doing and whatever adventuring that I'm going to go do in that area that day. Now, of course, we would hope that all of us are out every night and we're in some beautiful campground somewhere and we're in that beautiful spot by the lake and we're nowhere near anybody else, or we're camped out in the desert looking at the beautiful scenery on our own. But here's reality. It doesn't always work out that way. Especially when you're traveling places you have never been before. And you're fighting weather, and you're fighting when things are open and when things are closed down that you want to go see. And all these different scenarios that maybe you're out too long enjoying a hike somewhere, and now, you know, it's gotten late and you need to drive to the next area. You're at dark. If you're doing this stuff anywhere near the winter time, remember at the worst point in December, it's going to be dark at about 20 after 5. And even into January, it's going to be dark by 6 o'clock, 6:15, even in late January, early February. On those short days, you know, you're going to run out of daylight. A lot of people don't like driving after dark for obvious reasons. These are potential ideals that can help you out.